Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Gill Gross with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. First round, Roland Garros 2021 in the books. 9 sets won, 0 sets lost for the big three, all advancing to the second round. Novak Djokovic over Tennys Sandgren, Rafael Nadal over Alexei Popyrin, and Roger Federer over Denis Istomin. Let's start with Federer. This was the one that I think people were most intrigued with just because he was 1-2 on the season was Roger, but I think universally Federer's level impressed was quite dazzling, Amy.
Yeah, it's funny. I tweeted shortly before his match that Roger had to be feeling pretty good because Andujar beat Team, and that was the last guy that Roger had lost to at the Geneva Open. Well, it's kind of like, if you're following the NBA and your team loses, but then the team that your team lost to goes on to win the championship, you feel better, right? So sure enough, no sooner had I tweeted that he had to be feeling better after that brilliant performance, that he tweeted some skippy happy tweet about, a bunny or something. And I thought, wow, this bodes well. And when I saw the match, I saw his movement. He looks great. I mean, he had all the shots. He could drop shot, he could serve and volley. His forehand looked good. He looked like Roger of old, very spry.
And it's neat to see a player, his least favorite surface, the one where he's only won it and got to the finals 4 other times. But it's always fun to see a player on his less advantaged surface showing his stuff too. It reminds me when I'd see Nadal on grass, but you see Federer just how richly he plays, and he brought out a whole bunch of things against Istomin. Istomin, a guy who beat Novak several years ago in Australia, and kind of a veteran, somewhat solid. But again, Federer he just dissects people. I mean, he doesn't need to clobber them because that's not his game. So Istomin becomes, like I've said this before, kind of a witness, watching himself get kind of entranced by the Roger web, and it was really fun to see, and to see it at Roland Garros. I mean, Federer, moving on the clay and looking balanced and diverse. And like you said, the drop shots, the volleys, the serve, looking pretty snappy in his outfit as always. Just really nice start.
Yeah, I like that you said Istomin was a witness. It felt that way. And as a result, Denis is a steady player. He doesn't serve that big. They're going to play some points. Istomin's not going to be too aggressive. He gave Federer this blank canvas, I thought, to do his work on. And Roger said after the match that he felt like he had so many options. He could drop shot. He could serve volley. The highlight reel he put together was amazing. And just before I finish, I want to rewind to the first point you made, Amy, about Andujar beating Team. The same thing happened in Doha. Basilashvili beat Federer, and at the time, it looked like a pretty bad loss. Basilashvili went on to win the title. So now both of Federer's losses, they're looking like, well, how bad were those? It was 1-2. Everyone was panicking, but maybe they weren't so bad. And how much confidence would be my next question. Does the Istomin win give you guys about Federer's prospects moving forward?
In the post-match interview, Gil, his biggest concern seemed to be the towels. And if that's his biggest problem, he's probably in pretty good shape. Yeah, he said he was just getting used to the timing, and things are different now in the post-pandemic era, where some changes have been made. And as Joel and I were talking about earlier, Roger's not really a guy who likes change.
Yeah. Why should you like change if you are already occupying the power? Why change? He's the establishment. And also, I think Federer, moving forward, he next plays Marin, and so that's a little bit like, seems like old times. That's the guy he's 9-1 against, and he's familiar. So that's not too threatening. Maybe it could be, but I think if Federer feels familiar, it was interesting that what you said, Gil, about him propelling people to greater things. It's the opposite of what happens when someone beats Nadal. When someone beats Nadal, they're often so worn out that they just kind of don't have more. With Federer, wow, I beat Roger. But again, playing Federer is not as physical as playing Nadal. It's something else. You become a witness to it. Oh yeah, I just happened to occupy the museum with him, and I'll be able to
Yeah.
tell my grandchildren I got to play against Roger Federer.
It was so fascinating, the whole towel thing. And Roger, I love that. You know, he doesn't like change, and he was off the tour, then he comes back and things are different. And wait, the ball kids don't give me the towels now, and the crowd isn't here, and my family's not here. And wait, there's a serve clock. Whoa, what's happening here? And it muddied his head. I mean, the more he gets used to that, the better he's going to get. But my biggest concern is he fit enough to play a physical best of 5 match on clay, because he seems to be getting the rhythms down now of those pandemic related changes to the sport.
We
Does
don't know.
anyone know his body as well as he does? I mean, you just, would he be here if he couldn't?
Well, he did not play any tournaments until Geneva. Ivan Lubicic said he's not quite fit enough to do so yet. So I don't know if you get to 100% that, when you just weren't ready to play not too long ago. But Joel just said you don't know, and it's true. I don't know.
Well, look, and also he's even spoken repeatedly about how he's kind of set the bar in a different way at Roland Garros. He's talking about Wimbledon even during Roland Garros in a way that they were the opposite, that he wouldn't. I mean, he knows that this is just kind of, mostly he wants to leave here healthy. That's what he mostly wants to do. And so he can play matches and see what happens. And of course, if you're that accomplished, you still think, hey, maybe I could win it. If Phil Mickelson showed me anything, it's like I could still even win Roland Garros. But most of all, I want to leave here healthy and sound for Wimbledon. That's what matters most to him. So, and I guess knowledge of the body, I mean, we should all be so lucky that we should be like cars and have these little, needles and things in ourselves that say exactly how much capacity we have left.
What'll be interesting, you guys, is, Roger likes a little bit of a crowd, right? And the match that I just watched, the Djokovic Sandgren match, I mean, you could hear a pin drop. The camera clicking was bothering Sandgren in that match. There was nobody there. It was like a cavern. It was terrible, actually, because of the curfew. It'll be interesting to see if Roger gets scheduled for any matches like that.
Amy, it was terrible because you got used to it with the crowd, right? You weren't
Yeah.
saying it was terrible when we were covering New York, and it was the same way. It's just we now have this before and after comparison, before curfew and after curfew, and I agree with you. It is pretty awful after.
Yeah,
Should
what
we
did you think? Joel, what did you think about that match?
About the Novak match?
Yeah.
For the crowd energy, yeah, the crowd energy, it is strange. It was strange seeing a empty Chatrier, and this is not how they wanted to debut night play when they originally wanted to put it on the books. I mean, you could just imagine the energy of no matter who's playing and a French crowd at night, and then you got this curfew. Yeah, it was definitely strange. It'll be interesting to see what happens if there's a dramatic match there. I mean, so far these night matches we've seen just some pretty routine efforts, Serena Williams and then Novak. But yeah, it was strange. And you could see Sandgren was a little, obviously more perturbed by it than Novak. Yeah, it's very interesting.
He was perturbed by the scoreboard as well. We'll get to Rafa's match in a moment, but we'll start with Djokovic Sandgren since we're already on that path. I feel like we've talked about Djokovic Sandgren matches before, but
yes.
Joel, how would you assess the way Sandgren tests Novak or doesn't test Novak?
I felt that way too, and I covered this match, and I thought, and then I looked at their head-to-head. I think I may have watched all 4 matches they've played for various reasons, and it's really like Novak is a Mercedes. He is so well tuned, the chassis, the body, all these parts are right in order. And Sandgren, he hustles, he's fit, he's worked hard to give himself a career, but I don't know what his real plan is based on his skill set, how he's gonna apply pressure to Novak, what he's really gonna do. He's not gonna hit 40 aces, he's not gonna hit 50 winners. And again, you really see the limits of your innovation and skills when you come up against a better player, particularly a much better player. And what do you do? What do you think? What are you going to do to try to win points? And I handed Sandgren for hustling and looking to do some things and trying some drop shots. But you watch his shots don't always have quite enough depth, not quite enough accuracy. And so after a while, Novak just goes, okay, I'm comfortable here. I'm comfortable here. And he just keeps applying pressure. And Novak, 6 of 6 on when he held break points against Sandgren. 6 of 11, I'm sorry. 6 of 11 when against Sandgren. And then when Sandgren had break points, he lost all 6. He never won a break point against Novak. So he never broke Novak's serve. So it's a bad matchup for Sandgren. Look, this is a guy who had 7 match points against Federer in Australia in 2020. That's a matchup that might give him a little better shot. It's a guy with a one-handed backhand, someone who who knows.
I know that Sandgren has taken a set off of Novak at like the US Open. He plays him better on hard courts. And what occurred to me when I was watching them play on clay and how it wasn't even close is what a great clay court player Djokovic is. And, we forget that sometimes because Nadal has gobbled up all the RG titles. But Novak is in many ways made for clay. I mean, he's a great defender. He will bother you by extending the rally ad infinitum. So I thought that the surface really highlighted the gap between the talent level of the two players.
Oh, no question. Sandgren's in the American grain. He's got the hard court thing where he knows how to generate certain pace off a certain kind of bounce and for a certain kind of rally and kind of slash and hit some shots that are kind of big and earn him some points. And he can sometimes serve well. But I think Sandgren is he wouldn't call himself the most polished technical player. And Novak is about as polished as anyone who's ever held a racket. So it just becomes the assets of Sandgren become minimized, and Novak he's just purring right down the highway through every one of those points. And you just see after a while, Sandgren's not really going to hurt him. Yeah, and he's just not going to, particularly on clay.
Yep. The firepower isn't there. To your point, Amy, Novak's movement is court coverage. There's no way Sandgren can really hit through it on a consistent basis. But what really impressed me most about Djokovic's performance, which I thought was superb, was the way he played the first strike tennis that has sometimes lacked and was probably lacked a little bit against Nadal in the final last year, which is just the first forehand. And Sandgren was kind of blocking his return. There wasn't enough quality. There wasn't enough depth, but Djokovic really ate it up and took control of the point with his first forehands and won 86% of his first serve points. I thought that was great.
Well, Novak, what he needs to do when you're a top seed and you're playing an opening round match against someone who you're likely to beat, the question is, am I doing the things that are going to help me eventually win the tournament? Am I doing the things that down the road I need to keep doing? So it's not always just a matter of how do I beat this guy today, but how do I run the plays that are going to help me tomorrow as I come up against tougher players such as the Pablo Cuevas, who's going to be a much more of a trickier opponent for Novak than Sandgren.
Yeah, he looked like a guy, and we'll hit on all of the second round matches quickly at the end. Didn't Djokovic look like a guy who's been training in Paris and had the timing and the conditions down? That was my main concern. Is I look, we saw Sebastian Korda, who just won Parma, lost the first round straight sets after winning the title in Parma, playing the week before, going deep the week before a major. It's not something that is generally advisable. And that was the only sliver of concern that there may have been for Novak Djokovic. But what did he do in this match? He hit the ground running. Not for a moment did it look like he wasn't used to that kind of clay. He wasn't sliding right. He was off balance. His timing wasn't right. I mean, it was a fine-tuned version of Novak, which I think is impressive because he really hasn't been in Paris too long. And he's, I think probably had just maybe 2, maybe 3 days to practice on the Roland Garros clay.
And Rublev went out today. I mean, I think some of the younger guys they're just showing that they're not necessarily built for best of 5, or to contend with the big 3, the big 2, whatever you want to call it. It's like the seas are parting for the big 3.
Well, the better players. I mean, in tennis, it's an individual sport, and these people, Rublev, Korda, different ages, but still quite young, and the experience factor, and also the technical aspects. I remember a coach told me, you know, the great players, and Novak did this. They win a tournament in Novak's case on a Saturday. They get on an airplane and they show up to the next place, and they win on Tuesday because of their skills, and they're really dialed in, and they also all. I think we talked about this before with rituals. Oh, we talked about this with Novak in Australia. All the ritual things that comprise preparation lead to good things for the really better players. Like, so there isn't any questioning of ritual, of practice routine, of food. You know, they have, I mean, and Novak has got this stuff down better than like a lot of corporate CEOs. I mean, whether it's what am I eating when, how am I doing this? So nothing is kind of jarring him. Whereas I think someone like Korda, though he had a nice little run last year at Roland Garros, is like, oh wow, I just won a tournament. Oh wow, here I am. I mean, it's still kind of bright-eyed, but that doesn't always compel sustainable performance, because now you're riding a wave of excitement and energy. Novak, it's just business as usual. So we won a tournament on Saturday. Yeah, okay, I won a tournament. Now I go play another one.
He was the class of the field in Belgrade 2 and avenged his loss at Belgrade 1. By the way, Rublev in Djokovic's quarter, Aslan Karatsev in that area as well, who's arguably just as good as Rublev on this surface. I mean, you can debate that, but it's kind of apples to oranges. Let's move on to Nadal, who probably had the most trouble out, or did have the most trouble out of the 3 of them, because Popyrin had set points in the 3rd set. First 2 sets were quite straightforward. Double fault for Alexei Popyrin, a missed overhead on set point. And the double fault was on set point as well, if I didn't make that clear. But Nadal escapes. I thought his aura kind of helped him, because Popyrin did not, just couldn't close there. He didn't have it in the 3rd set. Nadal came back. Straight set victory for Rafa, but also a lot of positive signs in his game, and played pretty well. What did you think, Amy?
How many times have we seen it before? Someone fold like a lawn chair when, you know, they can take a set off Rafael Nadal on clay, or it's, in some ways it's frustrating. I mean, I'm a big Nadal fan, and I actually really wanted to see him win. But in some ways, I was frustrated when I saw him not be able to convert those set points. It's hard to explain why. I just think that I'm anxious to see the next generation do something great. And that was a missed opportunity, even though it was pretty clear he wasn't going to win the match.
Well, Popyrin is by far of the 3 first-round losers the one with the greater upside. He's 21. The other ones are kind of like reached some of where they're going to be, whether it's Istomin or Sandgren. I'm not looking to see either of them become top 15 players. Popyrin is 21 years old. He won the French juniors 4 years ago. Nadal speaks very highly of him. And for a while here in this match, in the early part of the 3rd set, he kind of found a little bit of the visions of Robin Soderling, you know, going after balls, hitting big, doing the things he needed to do, and showing, this guy, this could be something at some point, but not just yet. You're right. And it would have been interesting to see him take it into a 4th, because I think 4th sets are really interesting. I love 4th sets because it's the guy who's up 2 sets to 1 wants out of there, and then the other guy is wanting to take it. So I love seeing when you see a 4th set get into that 3-all, 4-all stage, and it's hanging right in bounds. But it didn't happen. And once Nadal got off the hook from the set points, he ran right through the tiebreak. He went up 6-1 quickly, and you could see the window had shut. But Popyrin, we're going to be seeing more of him. I mean, 21 years old, he's already 63 in the world, so it's pretty good.
You know, every year I look at the serving at the French Open to see if, you know, maybe this year it's a little more of a factor than it was last year due to heat or conditions or whatever. And knowing that Popyrin is such a big server, and to see him go out like that, I'm like, well, once again, I just question how much impact the serve is going to have this year.
Oh, you mean the tournament overall?
Yeah, just overall.
Well,
I look and see how the big servers are doing. And he's one of them I had marked.
Yeah.
well,
It's
if
no
Nadal has
Madrid.
learned anything, if we've learned anything from Nadal at Roland Garros among the 100 things we've learned, it's that, yeah, the big serve and $1 will buy you a croissant.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good in Paris.
Well, Isner took him to 5, and people love to bring that up and talk about it because it was
Yeah,
like this
I was at that
big
match.
event.
I saw that one. That was an interesting day at the beach. I believe that was 2011.
Yeah,
That was a
it
while
was.
ago. That's
Yep.
what's so amazing about these guys. Again, just to
Yeah.
see it, just the stretching of the years. I mean, of not just plausible performances into their 30s, but great performances beyond that. I mean, 10 years ago, yeah, Nadal, right, Isner, okay, and here, yeah, well done.
He's still going. Tennis Channel showed a graphic after the first set, which compared the height of the bounce of Nadal's forehand, and everyone talked about how with last year's French Open in October, colder conditions, lower bounce. Now we have our regular spring slot and warmer conditions, higher bounce. Whoa, 7-inch difference in the bounce of Rafa's forehand. Amy, what do you think of that?
Well, I looked at this with Shane Leange of Data Driven Sports Analytics. We looked at bounce height. We looked at temperature. Remember last year, the big controversy was the ball, new ball. Rafa doesn't like the ball. Rafa said something about the ball. We looked at ball brand. We looked at all these different sort of strange things that aren't mainstream. Did they have an impact on Rafa's performance at Roland Garros over the years? And it's great because you've got such a huge sample size. And we found that none of these things had any impact, including temperature, ball height, kind of ball that it is. None of them had any impact. He wins in all kinds of different conditions with all sorts of different scenarios, including ball bounce.
Those are great points about how nothing seems to deter Nadal. All these things affect his opponents, but it just shows how great he is and what all this stuff matters or doesn't. And these things, I mean, I've been around enough of these tournaments to know some of these things I call like first 2 or 3 day stories. The ball, the surface, and then after a while, okay, kids, we're all just playing tennis. It kind of evens out. These are pros. This isn't me showing up at the league playoffs wondering if the court is truly north-south or not. And adjusting to it being, 100 miles south of my normal sun. So these are pros.
Well, Medvedev says he likes these clay courts. He doesn't like any of the other clay courts, but these ones he likes, Joel. So I'm just going to throw that out there. But point well taken from both of you. Let's go to the second round match. And Rafa has Richard Gasquet, who he has a tremendous history with. 16 tour level meetings. Nadal has won all 16, but it would be inaccurate to say that Richard Gasquet never beat Rafa Nadal. What am I referring to, Joel?
Well, you're referring to a tournament they played when they were very young, a junior tournament, and Gasquet won. Gasquet beat him there. And but I think there's a great case. I remember covering a match they played at Roland Garros 3 years ago, and contemplating both of them. Gasquet's had a wonderful career, fine career, and it's just a difference in how each was raised. Gasquet was put on the cover of a tennis magazine in France when he was, I believe, 9 years old as a protege. He already had the beautiful one-handed backhand that all of my friends who have one-handed backhands talk to me about, have talked for years. And now they talk about Tsitsipas and his one-hander. And Gasquet, though, that almost may have set him back because he was so told what a great player he could be. I think if Tony Nadal had gotten word that Rafa could have been on a cover of a magazine, he would have banned that from happening. He would have said, there's no way you're going to be on the cover of a magazine. In fact, with that alone, you know what you should do? You should hand deliver magazines to everyone in the town. And I think there's just this whole approach to tennis. Gasquet's parents were pros. And I think Gasquet, by now having played Federer 16 times, I hope on the 17th, maybe he'll serve and volley 10 times. I mean, if you lose to someone that many times in a row who's that good on that surface, maybe you try something different, or you just kind of, okay, go about losing 3-4-2, and maybe you take a set further. I don't know what coach the Gasquet.
Gasquet definitely knows where the ball is coming, to the backhand, to the backhand, to the backhand. That's how Rafa plays one-handed backhand. So, yeah, moonball, you can't really drop shot Rafa. I mean, what can you do to Rafa on clay?
Okay. I know, I'll tell you something, but here's the thing. Here's how I look at the game. You're right.
Okay.
What can you do with Nadal versus on clay? But you go play someone who you're significantly overmatched with, who you've lost 16 times. Yeah, I can hit my shots. I can feel good. I'll be in a number of rallies, and maybe, Gasquet, look, he's a pro. He might extend him to an overtime set. He might even grab a set. But do I want how to compete against him effectively? So now what I should do is empty the kitchen sink. Why not hit some kickers and try some serve and volley? Now, granted, you're at the limits of your skills development, and this gets to the big thing about how players build their game. And this is why I so like players like Federer, and why I like, on the women's side, I like Katie McNally, people who are building the broadest possible arsenal. So when they have a chance to compete against someone who they're overmatched against, they might have some of these different shots in their arsenal they could do. So you're right. So otherwise, Gasquet is going to know, okay, here we go again. And Rafa's going to say, yeah, I know. I'm aware of your beautiful backhand. Go ahead, hit a few winners. We know what's going on here. It's going to play out like old times again, isn't it? So,
would you go as far as to underhand serve?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Why not?
Would you, Gill?
But I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about Gasquet. And I'm not going to accuse Gasquet of this flat out, but that there are a large portion of players who have these kinds of head-to-head with members of the big three, and they walk on the court resigned. We're acknowledging that, right? That they don't really believe that they can win.
I wouldn't say resigned as much as pragmatic. That you're not, like sort of aware. They're quite aware of that such history. That's true.
I think some of them go out there and think, boy, it would be really good if I could get a set, or what can I do not to embarrass myself? Unfortunately, I think a lot of them have that in the back of their head.
Well, Gasquet has had, it's kind of interesting. It's almost like we get Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the 5 stages of tennis life and death of that you go through, whether it's optimism, acceptance, denial. I should come up with a chart. But like Gasquet knows he's not going to embarrass himself. In fact, innovation, that's why he doesn't want to innovate, because that makes him think he's going to embarrass himself. He won't embarrass himself if he loses 3-2-3, and it's a fair enough. He's a pro. He's not going to embarrass himself by losing. He's not going to get triple bageled.
And what if he loses 1-2-1? Is that embarrassing?
It's unfortunate. But it's rough. It's clay, and he's too good. And I did my game. I remember seeing that. I've seen that numerous times. Instead of like, hey, open the box. You beat me 16 straight times. I got to try something. I'm going to serve from the doubles alley. I'm going to come in on your return. I'm going to just try a bunch of things and and I think, this is my way of properly regarding you.
It feels scary to people to do that. I think, it feels scary.
Of course but it's like, absolutely, it feels scary. I think
you got to be brave.
It was scarier walking around with a mask for 6 months. I mean, think about it. Right.
Yeah. Hey, so you guys, have you watched any footage of the 13-year-old Nadal Gasquet match? I tweeted it out today.
I saw some of it. Yeah, it's fun.
Well, I will say this, my biggest takeaway, Gasquet's game is beautiful even at 13 years old, but my biggest takeaway was how far behind Nadal's serve was from the rest of his game. I'm stunned. I mean, his serve was really bad technically as a 13-year-old. The rest of his game pretty beautiful, pretty great. But clearly, like, the serve just wasn't valued. It was just, okay, start the point. He didn't use his legs. He was kind of going backwards away from the court instead of into the court. I mean, it was a real mess. And to a lesser extent, that's kind of how he entered the tour as a teenager as well, with the serve way behind the rest of his game. So I find that fascinating.
You got the Chris Lewitt Spanish background. I'm going to keep hammering on you this for the next 20 years. What's the approach to the serve in that world?
It's de-emphasized a little bit. You have to hit a kick serve. I'd say that's emphasized. Second serve, accelerate, hit it as hard as you can. Kick serve, need it, righty backhand. But the development of the serve as kind of the win the point outright weapon, not really a thing. It's more of a protect yourself.
How about the development of the serve as a gain a little traction to start the point? You know, I mean, instead of if you look at the serve as first down, instead of the serve getting you to 2nd and 8, how about the serve getting you to 2nd and 5?
Well, I think with the development of the forehand as your primary weapon, I think the serve comes into play there. Ideally, I just think again,
it's serve +1. I'm not talking about the serve +1. I'm talking about the serve itself. I guess the clay is such a neutralizer that it's kind of like, why am I even doing this? So that's kind of interesting. And the young Rafa had that, but he's, now it's very much for him. And we'll be talking about this more in the shows to come. The serve +1, the combo.
And I think it's changing, by the way. And I'm not on the grounds in Spain, but I do think that they're starting to modernize and start to look at the serve differently and emphasize it more. All right, Federer versus Cilic, Amy.
Yeah, these guys have some history, right?
Yeah, a lot of it.
I mean, Cilic has been a big server. I'm not sure what he's doing right now. But again, we've talked in this show about how that's not really a factor, and Cilic certainly isn't the player that he has been when these two players have met in the past. I always think of the Wimbledon final in 2017 where Roger crushed him, and it was heartbreaking. But this is interesting because they're both a little bit not who they have been.
Well, right. And Cilic, though, I've always liked Cilic. I've liked his work ethic. I've liked his game. I've liked his backhand. He's one of the players I find he's a lot more fun to watch play in person than he is on television. I find him more. Some players there isn't as wide a gap, but when I've seen Cilic play in person, I find him very dynamic. I remember seeing him in Australia the year he got to the finals, and he extended Federer to 5 sets in that final. When he won the U.S. Open, beat Federer in the semis. That's his only win against Federer. He's 1-9.
I was there. I was at that one.
Yeah. So, we both, there we go. So
yeah,
pretty neat. But, and I expected after that 14 U.S. Open win, I expected him to be more in the hunt more often. And a series of things, it hasn't quite exactly gone that way. I mean, I'm not exactly sure, but I think for this match, though, I don't know. Cilic is another guy who seems to do better on. He needs the speed of the hard court. But I don't know. This is where we start to see signs of Roger. I mean, let's say they split the first 2 sets. Now we begin to see Roger's fitness and match play more.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to that kind of test. It's certainly going to be a bigger test than Istomin because Cilic has firepower and weapons. It's just there's been a lot of errors recently, and Cilic has struggled to win matches even when he's put himself in winning positions because he's really, really struggled over the last 2-3 years. Ever since really Wimbledon 2018, he was a 3 seed and he lost to Guido Pella in the early rounds, and he was supposed to do damage in that tournament coming off the final. And that was, for some reason, a turning point in his career. He never had great results after that. It's the nerve management that I think has gone out the window for Cilic. And in big spots, he's missing, and he just seems nervous towards the end of his career. In the beginning and the middle of his career, he was handling those moments, and that's what has really left him.
Well, it's interesting. It made me think as you said that about sort of this, we're looking at the 3 and we talk about these contenders, but there are these generations of people who've tilted against the greats, and then they haven't, and then they, whether it's Tsonga or Burdick, and Ferrer at least kind of brought it all in because of his playing style. But the ones with the bigger weapon games, they kind of huffed and they puffed and they couldn't blow the big three down, and then they just kind of like, ugh. And maybe that's for you sort of resignation, because at least Federer had his eternal hustle that never let him down. So he just kept on grinding, and even he that reached the stage where even he found his empty mark. But it's just interesting. You could almost chronicle these multiple generations, and it's like nothing in tennis history, because these guys have lasted at the top so long.
I've heard Chrissy and Martina talk about how they got more nervous towards the end of their careers, because they kind of would think in the back of their mind, oh, how many more chances will I have? And I say this kind of not to make a point about Cilic, but to also appreciate what our three have done thus far, where maybe Federer's had some moments here and there where the nerves have gotten to him in a way that's been detrimental. But for the most part, these guys have maintained their steely nerve management in big matches, and their record in major finals is what you would point to kind of prove that.
Well, Federer was asked after the Istomin match, what's more important, confidence or experience? And he said, for sure, confidence. So it doesn't appear that Cilic has a lot of confidence going right now.
I would say that, but I would also say, Roger Federer, that guy, he's kind of amazing. And yet it's like, yeah, that would be one of those things, hearing that is, yeah, he said that. What's that mean? Well, where do you get confidence? Well, experience helps. I mean, it's like, it's sort of like the way I was telling a coach once. I said, yeah, process this and process that, but nothing really validates the process better than good outcomes. So Roger can kind of make experience number 2, but golly, he can make confidence number 1, because he can kind of wax on it, but he's had a lot of good experiences.
I think reps help confidence too, and he's starting to get his reps up now.
Totally.
But reps is in also, like, how about the other 50 slam semis and finals? You know what I mean?
True.
Yeah.
The piggy bank, it's bigger than a piggy bank, right? It's a frig. I mean, if viewed every player's experience confidence as this sort of like bank account, maybe that's our study of, like, you come up with multiplier percentages. It's sort of like the way I came up with this thing called the Grand Slam Multiplier Club. Winning 1 slam is 1, but 2 is 4, 3 is 9. You see what I mean? Like, each slam, it's a multiplier. So in a way, Federer has a 400 factor on his slams. You see, which is tremendous.
Good experience, right? Good experience builds confidence. Bad experience doesn't. Let's throw that qualifier in there. Djokovic, Cuevas. This will be the first meeting between those two. What do you think of Pablo Cuevas, Joel?
He's an interesting player. He plays well. He's done well. He's had some results. He's challenged people. It's kind of, that's a little more intriguing. Again, it's nice to see how, as we advance through the draw, a little more tougher test. I mean, I'm interested to see that match. So I think Novak is so reliable. That's the thing with him. I find him so relentlessly reliable.
I agree. Cuevas is a shot maker. That's where the flair is going to come from, which is going to be fun to watch, because Novak's always so good at trying to neutralize and take those blows and to kind of throw the flames back where they came from. So we will talk to you guys soon. That'll do it for this episode of 3 as the Big 3. Move on to the second round. All 3 of them straight sets, 9-0, perfect. Make sure that you are following and subscribing on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Leave a rating and review on Apple. Like the video and comment on YouTube. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.